Hi, welcome to another of these Heart for Prayer videos. At St Andrews, we have four heart for statements. We have a heart for Jesus and his gospel. We have a heart for each other. We have a heart for Plymouth, and we have a heart for prayer. Four statements that describe the things that are just really important to us. And prayer is one of those big things where we're saying, as part of our Christian lives and as part of our church life, prayer has got to be a big thing for us, fundamental to who we are, knowing that, as the Bible puts it, unless the Lord builds the house, the labourers labour in vain. And so we want to be praying and prayerful people. And so hence these videos, just trying to encourage each other in that kind of prayerfulness. And if you've been joining us over the weeks, you'll know by now that we have been using Jesus' prayer as the framework for these meditations, thinking about the priorities that he sets for us in prayer, that as children of God, we are people of praise, praying, hallowed be your name. We're looking at Psalm 97 for that. Praying with hope, your kingdom come. We were looking at the book of Revelation for that. We want to pray about our daily needs, being people of faith, and we looked at how Nehemiah was that kind of prayer. We want to be people of grace who know we need grace. We looked at Psalm 32, confessing our sins, seeking forgiveness, even as we're people who want to show other people grace in our lives as well. And that leads us to this last one that we haven't looked at yet, where Jesus encourages us to pray, commands us to pray, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Or as some translations have it, the evil one. It seems pretty clear that Jesus is talking about the devil there. So I thought we'd take a look at, we haven't been to any of the epistles yet, and this is Peter's first letter, 1 Peter. So turn to 1 Peter chapter 5, and we're going to look at this little passage just here from verse 6 through to verse, just a little bit, through to verse 9, just there. So 1 Peter 6, here we go, let me read it. He writes, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings. Okay, so you can see why I've chosen, if we're studying here, so lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. You can see that passage picks up that thought just here. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. So if we're praying, lead us not into temptation, and by the way, it does at first sight sound like a funny prayer request, that, doesn't it? Father, lead us not into temptation, as if he would lead us into sinful temptation. But of course we know he wouldn't, but we're putting it the other way around. We're saying, Lord, we really don't want to go in that direction. Lead us in the opposite direction. Deliver us from the evil one. So if we're praying that, what kind of things might we be praying about and praying for if we were to expand on that prayer request in our lives? Well, let's go back to this 1 Peter 5 passage and have a look. One of the things you can see from this verse 8, is your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, he is looking for someone to devour. It's such a vivid picture, isn't it? So we can see the devil is an opportunist. He's looking for those opportunities in our lives that he will be able to use to lead us into temptation. And in particular, in 1 Peter chapter 5, the opportunity that he particularly is looking to exploit here is, Peter tells us here, is the whole area of suffering. So we know from reading the rest of 1 Peter that it's a letter dealing in large part with the issue of persecution and people suffering for their faith. And as we'll see in a minute, that is an opportunity for the devil to get in. But I think we'll see the principles that and the things that Peter mentions here will apply a little bit more widely than just sufferings. So let's just have a look. Let me get a piece of paper. Here we go. So your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, and Peter says, resist him. So what kind of person is the kind of person that is able and equipped to resist the devil's temptations? Well, the first thing Peter highlights here is humility. So let me write that here. What kind of person is able to resist the devil? Okay, so someone who is humble. Okay, look at that there. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand. He's been talking about humility just here. He's been talking about the need for those who are younger to submit themselves to their elders, perhaps particularly elders here. He's thinking of those who lead the church here. And then he says, all of you clothe yourselves in humility towards one another. And here, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand. So humility towards those who lead us, humility towards each other, and then humility towards God. And, if we're praying, if we're the kind of people who are saying, I want to learn to pray, I want to be a prayer, then we're already on that path to humility, because to pray is to say, as Jesus teaches us, to pray, our Father in heaven. It's to say, God, I know I'm not God, you're God, and I need your help in my life. So to pray is to begin to humble yourself, to say, God, you are big and I am small, and I really need your help in my life. So we are humbling, and it might be that we are facing difficult circumstances. Do you remember Nehemiah we looked at last time? The whole situation the Jews were in exile. Jerusalem is burned and the walls are broken down, and Nehemiah humbled himself and said, "You're in control, Lord. Everything that's happening happens under your mighty hand. So we submit to you and your sovereign rule. You're king in our lives, and we're bringing these issues to you." Okay, so first thing is we need to be humble people if we're going to resist the devil. Those that are able to come and kneel before God in prayer. Secondly, we are to be, pretty obviously, prayerful people. Okay, so the humility leads to the prayerfulness. So look how he puts it here. He doesn't use the word prayer, but he says, cast all your anxiety on God because he cares for you. That's what Jesus is reminding us of when he reminds us to pray, our Father in heaven. We have a Father who cares for us. Cast all your anxiety on him. Now, it's interesting to think just here, why might Peter be raising the issue of anxiety? Okay, well, in particular here, it's anxiety, presumably, due to these sufferings, this persecution that's going on. But if we just think about the issue of how we handle anxiety when it comes into our lives, whether, this sort of thing, suffering for being a Christian or for all kinds of other reasons, how we handle anxiety is a big issue for us in our lives. So look, let me put it on here. If I was to ask you that question, how do you handle anxiety? There might be various ways. So some examples of how, unhelpful examples of the way we handle anxiety is sometimes some of us seek to smother it. What I mean by that is we might, when we feel anxious, we might turn to food or drink, I suppose particularly alcohol, or pleasure, or entertainment. And entertainment may include relatively benign things like binging on a sitcom, or darker stuff like pornography and so on. But whatever we turn to, we tend to smother the anxiety. And if the anxiety is, sustained, then we keep on turning to these things, and we can get hooked on these things, can't we? Even addicted to them as we seek to smother the thing that makes us feel uncomfortable. So smothering it is one unhelpful response. Another unhelpful response is to run. from anxiety. So, or run from so if a relationship's causing us anxiety, we sort of duck out of that relationship, or if it's work, we shirk things at work or even quit. Or, in this case, if it's suffering for our faith, then I suppose one of the things that Peter's worried about is that the devil will get in and say, well, just pack in being a Christian. Just keep your head down. Just don't stand up for Jesus. Just be ashamed of you don't need to worry about that. So the devil will be using these sufferings, preying on the anxieties about suffering, and suggesting people just run away from the suffering. So that's one another unhelpful response. And then just a third one to suggest, I don't know quite how to express this one, the right sort of word for it, but I'm going to say fake control. Okay, so anxiety happens because there's some situation that we can't sort out, we can't control. It's not the way we want it to be, and a way to cope with that is to kind of introduce the illusion of control into other areas of life. So the things we can control, like other people in our lives, we get angry with them and start bossing them around. Or we do something in our lives that gives us the feeling of control. So sometimes people who self-harm say they do it because it gives them that sense of control over things. All of these are just different ways of coping with anxiety. And in this passage, Peter is saying, you guys, you're suffering. There's obvious anxieties related to that. Well, what you should do, not smother it, not run from this persecution and pretend you're not a Christian. Not take it out on someone else with a fake sense of control, but rather cast all your anxiety on God. So instead, really pray about it. Talk to him about it. Okay, lift it up to him. So how do we resist the devil? We want to be humble people, which leads to being prayerful people. We don't want these anxieties to be ways that the devil can get in and produce this bad fruit in our lives. We want the anxieties to do something else, to drive us to God, to pray, and then we'll be able to resist him. He says here, so what have we got? We've got humility, we've got prayerfulness, and then in verse 8 we've got be alert and sober-minded. So if we're going to resist the devil, we need to be watchful people. Okay. And it's a very interesting word. It says, be alert and sober-minded. That word, sober-minded, is a real favourite of Peter's. And we can see what the feel of the word is there, can't we? To be sober is, obviously not to be not drunk, to have a mind that's alert rather than sluggish or out of control. Let me just flick to there's two other references in 1 Peter where Peter uses this word. So the first one comes in chapter 1 verse 13. So if you flick over to 1 verse 13, just here, look. Peter says, therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed. So therefore with minds that are alert and fully sober. So similar sort of idea to the one here. And the idea here is, I think some translations say being ready for action. Okay, minds that are alert or ready for action and fully sober. So to be sober is to be not reactive, but ready to act, okay, in the right kind of way. You're not just reacting to what's happening, but you're the kind of person who knows what to do. Here is the devil, he's tempting me, and I'm the kind of person that can resist because I know what to do in that circumstance. I'm sober-minded, ready to act. That's the kind of feel for it. Or if you look at chapter 4, verse 7, he uses the same word again. In fact, it's on this page. Look, just a little bit up here. The end of all things is near, he says. Therefore, be alert and of sober mind, so that you may pray. Okay, so, sober-minded means that you are steady of soul. You are someone who's not allowing, all these things to sort of take over in your life because of the anxiety that's there. Instead, there's a steadiness to you. If you're spending all your time watching TV or drinking, you're never going to get down to praying. But there's a steadiness if you're sober-minded that means, look what he says, so alert and of sober mind so that you may pray. Okay, so crucial that we're sober-minded so that we can be prayerful. And then the one just here in 5 verse 8 particularly emphasizes the idea of watchfulness. Okay, be alert and of sober mind. The idea there is watchfulness. Okay, so I know that the devil's going to be looking for opportunities to take advantage of my anxieties or whatever difficult situation I find myself in. So I'm watchful, and I know that. So being a watchful person, which is a product of being sober-minded. And then the last thing that Peter highlights is resist him, resist the devil, standing firm in the faith. So we want to be people who are firm in the faith. Okay, we've got convictions, and where do our Christian convictions come from? They come from the Bible. Okay, so we want to be people who are growing in the Word, in the knowledge of the Word, and have a working knowledge of it. Okay, so we're reading it in such a way as to help us live the Christian life, to understand what we're supposed to believe and how we're to put that into practice. A growing working knowledge of the Word. Okay, so when we're praying this prayer, just here, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Okay, here are some of the things that we might be praying for. We're praying, Lord, I don't want to fall into temptation, so deepen my ability to be humble, okay, to recognize my vulnerability, to recognize my smallness and your bigness. And Father, may that lead me to a prayerfulness, a dependence on you, so that when I feel anxious about things, that doesn't become an opportunity for the devil to get in. Rather, I'm rolling these anxieties off onto you, O Lord. And help me to be sober-minded so that I can be watchful, okay? And maybe all these things too, ready to act, not just react. Steady of soul so that I am prayerful and watchful, knowing and becoming experienced for the ways that I know the devil, leads me into temptation and sin. And Father, deepen my conviction. Help me to be someone who is firm in the faith. So praying that prayer might involve, or I recommend it involves, praying for those things in your life as well. We've sort of worked our way through the Lord's Prayer, and I'm going to do one more of these videos next week, just kind of sort of wrap things up as well. We're having something of a focus on prayer this spring and summer. We're saying, it's one of our big 4 emphases. We have a heart for prayer. And after Easter, we're going to be running a little course in church called Deeper into Devotion. I'll give you a bit more detail about that next week, but I just want to flag it up now and encourage you to look out for that, because it will take some of these things we've been looking at further and deeper, and it's really important that we give our attention to the whole area of prayer and growing in it. So I hope that's encouraging today. Praying the Lord's Prayer, particularly praying that particular request just there. Take care, and I will see you next week.